It's over. The lights are dimming, the cameras are silent. And Blake Lively, the Hollywood Golden Girl once untouchable, now stands on the edge of a career collapse that no one saw coming. What began as a courtroom victory has spiraled into chaos, betrayal, and mystery. And tonight we uncover how one Instagram post, one secret payment, and one broken silence may have rewritten her story forever. Blake Lively, once seen as the face of Hollywood elegance and power, now finds herself standing in the eye of a storm that refuses to fade, and as the headlines grow louder, the whispers behind the scenes tell a story that feels almost cinematic. A fall from grace so intricate, it reads like the final act of a movie that no one expected to end. This way, sources close to the situation reveal that what began as a celebration of a supposed legal victory soon turned into a chain reaction that dismantled everything she built for years. On June 10th, her team made the grand announcement claiming a clean sweep in her ongoing case, painting her as the symbol of triumph and strength, while public relations experts flooded social media with praise. But within hours, that entire narrative was upended by the one person no one saw coming: her husband. Ryan Reynolds, when he posted a simple story that sent shockwaves through the internet, 11 quiet words that changed everything. And while the post itself was calm, the silence that followed was deafening. Insiders say that the moment that post went live, everything in Blake's world began to crack behind the curtain. Her team scrambled to contain the damage, but the story had already escaped the carefully built PR walls and was spreading faster than they could react. The story wasn't just about a case anymore. It was about perception, trust, and the sudden realization that even those closest to her might no longer be willing to protect the illusion. People close to the production of her last film began to speak softly at first, then louder, saying things that painted a picture of confusion and chaos on set, claims that decisions were being made not for art but for attention, that control had become obsession, and that the lines between personal power and professional ethics had begun to blur. Those same whispers soon evolved into something more serious: talk of unexplained meetings, secret visits, and payments that raised eyebrows everywhere. Yet no one could prove anything. And so the rumors lived in the shadows, waiting for the right spark to ignite them. And Ryan's post was exactly that spark, the digital moment that set fire to an already fragile image. The next morning, reports say Blake's reaction was intense. She felt cornered, betrayed, and desperate to regain control of the story. But every move she made only added more fuel to the growing blaze. Calls between her and her publicists reportedly turned frantic as headlines began to shift from victory to scandal. Phrases like sudden fallout and industry backlash began appearing everywhere. And while the internet debated the truth of what was happening, the Hollywood insiders watching from a distance began to see what they believed was a pattern. A star who had perhaps overplayed her hand, trying to control both art and narrative at the same time, and now losing both. Some insiders have described her attempts to steer her last major project as overly assertive and increasingly erratic, suggesting that her involvement had blurred the boundaries between creative collaboration and personal influence. Others claim that long before the legal drama ever began, tensions were rising between Blake and her colleagues, that creative disagreements had turned into professional standoffs, and that the atmosphere on set had become tense to the point of exhaustion by the time the project wrapped. There were reportedly fractures everywhere. Relationships between producers, actors, and crew members strained by weeks of silent frustration, while her public image remained radiant her behind the scenes. Reality was far more complicated, and as more details trickled into the press, it became clear that this wasn't just a minor PR crisis. It was the beginning of a complete unraveling, one that would reach into every corner of her professional and personal life. What followed next felt less like gossip and more like revelation, and it left fans wondering if the woman they had watched rise to stardom was now witnessing the slow motion collapse of everything she had worked for. In the end, it wasn't a rival studio or a hidden enemy that began her downfall. It was silence, the kind that follows truth when it finally begins to surface. And what no one knew at that moment was that this was only the beginning of a story that would get darker, stranger, and far more unpredictable with every passing day. As the storm grew louder, and the rumors began to merge into a single, unbroken conversation, Hollywood itself seemed to shift, its gaze away from admiration and into quiet disbelief. The same executives who once rushed to work with Blake Lively were now quietly stepping back, unsure of what might unfold next. industry insiders began to talk about a series of mysterious meetings that reportedly took place during the height of her legal drama encounters that were never officially documented and yet were whispered about in corridors and late-night calls by those who claimed to know more than they should, according to people close to the matter. Several off-record discussions occurred between members of her public relations circle and individuals connected to key court figures, each meeting aligning suspiciously with crucial case milestones. And while nothing has been proven, the timing alone was enough to ignite widespread speculation. These rumors painted a picture of strategy, influence, and a desperate attempt to control an outcome that was slipping through her fingers. One source described it as a game of chess where every move was designed not to win fairly, but to make sure no one else could play at all. Meanwhile, as all of this unfolded, Ryan Reynolds remained quiet, his silence turning from confusion to confirmation for many observers. He did not defend nor deny, he simply watched as the headlines consumed everything. And that quiet detachment made the story even more haunting, because when someone who has shared both the screen and life with you chooses not to speak, it speaks. Louder than any statement ever could reports from inside their circle claim that Blake tried to reach out, tried to patch what had been broken in the aftermath of his post, but those calls went unanswered. Meetings were canceled, statements were rewritten, and what was once a united front had become two separate worlds. And in those quiet spaces between them, the truth began to take shape. Insiders say her PR team realized too late that their entire defense strategy had been built on incomplete information, that there were things Blake had allegedly chosen not to share with them. Information that could have changed everything if known earlier. Once those missing pieces surfaced, including financial documents and unexplained transfers, the firm made the decision to distance itself almost immediately, citing a breakdown in trust. This marked the beginning of her isolation, not just from the industry, but from her own support system. One by one, connections began to dissolve. Netflix quietly removed her upcoming special project that had been marketed as a heartfelt discussion about art and integrity. Major film studios postponed projects she had been attached to, and journalists who once lined up for interviews suddenly stopped asking questions. The silence wasn't just professional, it was cultural. Hollywood had made its decision, and it was loud without a single statement being issued. The message was clear. Something about Blake's image was no longer aligning with the values the industry wanted to project, and so doors began to close one after another. Yet behind all of this, something even more unsettling was happening as legal analysts revisited the court case. New voices began emerging, questioning whether the judgment that had once been celebrated as a clean victory was in fact fair or compromised. Reports surfaced that a former assistant to a judicial figure had stepped forward, providing statements that hinted at irregularities and new evidence. This development reignited the entire conversation and transformed what had been dismissed as gossip into a full-scale investigation. Suddenly, Blake's win wasn't a win at all. It was a question, a mystery, with too many loose ends and too many coincidences. And as the investigation expanded beyond state oversight into possible federal review, the pressure became unbearable. What had started as a glamorous return to the spotlight had evolved into an unpredictable descent into legal and reputational chaos. Blake's team tried to remain calm, releasing carefully worded statements, emphasizing her dedication to truth and transparency. But the internet had already decided, and perception in Hollywood moves faster than evidence with every passing day. The tension deepened and the suspense grew heavier. Everyone wanted to know one thing: if these claims were false, why did the people closest to her stay silent? And if they were true, how deep did this story really go by the time mid-June arrived? It was no longer about a movie or a marriage, it was about survival. And the growing realization that no amount of celebrity influence could protect someone from the consequences of secrets once they start to unravel. By the time the calendar reached the middle of June, the situation surrounding Blake Lively had transformed from a rumor storm into a full-blown cultural reckoning, and it seemed as though every piece of her once carefully built empire was beginning to collapse under the weight of questions that refused to go away. Those who had once worked closely with her started to share stories quietly and cautiously, describing an atmosphere of control, confusion, and constant tension on set. They spoke of rewrites that shifted tone and meaning, of scenes that once carried deep emotional messages being reshaped into glossy moments meant to appeal more to image than to message. Insiders recalled long days of disagreement followed by longer nights, of damage control, the production team reportedly found itself navigating an endless maze of requests, edits, and revisions until the story that had once been about healing and strength began to lose its heart and identity. This wasn't the usual creative tension of a film set. This was something different, something that felt personal. A kind of power struggle disguised as collaboration, and as the project neared completion, even those trying to protect her began to realize that the situation was unsustainable when the legal case later surfaced. It brought those memories rushing back for many people involved. They began to see patterns that felt familiar, the drive to control the narrative, the constant rewriting of perception, and the insistence that the public see her not just as an actor, but as the architect of something larger. As the case reopened for review, under new scrutiny, experts began to suggest that the outcome might not withstand further investigation, that too many inconsistencies had emerged, and that the deeper authorities looked, the more unanswered questions they found. Yet throughout it all, Blake remained largely unseen. Her once vibrant social media presence turned almost silent. She stopped attending. Events stopped appearing in interviews, and for weeks the only trace of her existence came from second-hand accounts and unverified sightings. It was as if she had vanished into a kind of voluntary exile. Those who knew her best described this period as both strategic and emotional. She was reportedly trying to regroup and control what little narrative remained, while also processing the shock of how quickly everything had fallen apart. At this point, her marriage was rumored to be under immense strain. Her partnerships with brands were suspended, and her publicists had cut contact. The woman once praised for her charisma and effortless grace was now facing the brutal truth that in the digital age, reputation can turn in a heartbeat. Her story became less about stardom and more about the fragility of image, about how quickly admiration can turn to doubt when trust is broken. People who once saw her as a symbol of empowerment now saw her as a mystery, one that seemed to deepen with every new revelation. And what made this chapter even more intense was the silence from those who could have defended her colleagues, co-stars, and even her closest friends offered no comment. Every unanswered question became its own headline, and the absence of reassurance only made the speculation louder. Legal insiders began hinting that the reopening of the case could lead to wider implications, that this situation might redefine how celebrity influence intersects with the legal system itself. One law professor noted that if the evidence being reviewed held weight, it could lead to repercussions far beyond one actor's career, potentially shifting how courts handle conflicts of interest in high-profile entertainment disputes. The suspense grew daily. Social media exploded with debates, theories, and arguments. Fans were torn between disbelief and disappointment, while industry experts were quietly predicting that this could become one of the defining scandals of the decade. The narrative had changed. It was no longer about who was right or wrong, but about the cost of power and the price of silence. As the days passed, each new detail felt like another missing puzzle piece falling into place, painting a picture that was both shocking and inevitable: the fall of a star. Not through one mistake, but through a series of choices that slowly consumed the legacy she had spent years creating. And yet, despite everything, no one knew how the story would end. There was still one final act waiting in the shadows, a conclusion that could either bring redemption or seal her fate forever. In the end, Blake Lively's story stands as a powerful cautionary tale about the fragility of image, reputation, and control in, i.e., a world that never stops watching. What began as a glamorous career defined by red carpets, movie premieres, and picture-perfect family moments turned into a storm of scrutiny and unanswered questions. The court battles, the PR strategies, and the carefully crafted narratives all began to crumble under the weight of contradictions. Once celebrated as the face of Hollywood elegance, Blake found herself at the center of a public reckoning that questioned not only her truth, but the entire machinery built around her. Her silence spoke louder than any statement. For some, it was an admission of guilt. For others, it was the quiet resilience of someone unwilling to let the noise dictate her fate. But the deeper truth is that fame has always been a double-edged sword, and Blake Lively's fall from grace revealed just how sharp that edge can be. The same spotlight that once celebrated her now dissected every flaw, every motive, and every connection. In the court of public opinion, redemption is rare and costly. Yet if there's one lesson buried beneath the chaos, it's that authenticity, not perfection, is what audiences crave. Whether Blake rises again or fades into the background will depend on how she faces the truth, not how she spins it. The story isn't over yet. Hollywood loves a comeback just as much as it loves a downfall. But this time, the cameras won't decide her fate. The truth will. And when it finally comes to light, it will either expose everything she tried to hide or reveal the woman behind the illusion once and for all.